Good afternoon, everyone. It is, what is today? My God, August 29th, 2024. It's a little after 1. We are opening House Bill 3610 Task Force on Alcohol Pricing and Addiction Services. Adam, can we get a roll call, please?
Senator Solomon. Here today. Senator Cano. Chair Sanchez.
Present.
Representative Reschke. Don't see it there. Chief Barrett. He disappeared. Oh, there he is. Okay. Vaughn Berry.
Chief Barrett is here.
Rob Corbett. See him.
He's right there.
Yeah. Annalise Dolph.
Here.
Jamie Floyd.
Present.
Dr. Tom Jean.
Present.
Todd Jeter. John Colmer. Okay. Sarah Lochner.
Here.
Janet McCamey.
Here.
Director Prince.
Present by video. Hello, everyone.
Marcus Reed.
Present.
Jason Renault. See him in there. Danelle Romaine.
Here.
Solera Salazar.
Here.
Aaron Sarnoff Wood.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Okay, folks. A little bit of a headache today, so I'm gonna try not to be very cranky. But what I would like us to start with is just first of all to recognize that we have we had a long discussion last time about like all the details and all of the DOJ's concerns about public record or public meetings and blah, blah, blah. And about all of the information that we were trying to make sure we had just in the right place at the right time. And I believe we got everything up on the website. Is that correct? Okay. And what I want to make sure that we're thinking about today, of course, you all have the in front of you, the agenda and all of the things that we're supposed to be looking at and, you know, the details of on the actual bill and all of that. And what we're looking to get to is not necessarily like, we're not gonna, the final big report here is what we're, all of the stuff, all of the recommendations. You all put some recommendations in. And vote on essentially accepting the recommendations. That's essentially what I want to get to first of all. The recommendations that were submitted, right? Yes, yay, they were recommendations, they were submitted. Are they the ones we want to, accept? right?
And Chair, do we want Adam to share the?
Yeah, oh God, yeah, show us the compiled list of
Uh-huh.
recommendations, because I think there's like some 22 pages, correct?
Thereabouts.
Something like that.
Procedurally, Danilo may look at your one distributors. Are we gonna go through each individual recommendation? Are we voting as a block, as on everything?
I would like us
once?
you're welcome to go through all, of them. Did you? And you sent them out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody got a chance to go through that, correct? I was not wanting us to necessarily, I mean, we can go through them if people want to look at them. And then what my hope was that we would be able to get to then a summary that staff could do like the individual summary piece at some point soon, but that we could just accept all of them as a full, essentially on block, I guess, if you want to look at it like that, that these are the recommendations. We accept them as the recommendations that were submitted.
So the idea is then that we're
And then we say the summary.
not taking an up or down vote on a beer or wine tax, is what you're saying.
Right.
You're saying all these people from the task force submitted recommendations, some contradict one another, and these are all the recommendations, and that's what our report's gonna look like. No,
Well,
And based on that, Chair, we had a discussion with DOJ this morning, and that would be the first step in saying, this is what's going to be in the
part of the big
final
report. Right, the
I think
recommendations were made.
draft.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Because we can't say, we can't say that, the report says this or that, but without all of the recommendations being a part of that report. Right? We want to be able to say, these were the recommendations that were made. Right? And then we will then summarize it based on what we then get to. Okay?
Or with Two-Town Center, are we then later voting on the individual measures, or is that just not, that's off the table?
That's a discussion
That's the discussion.
for the body today.
Yes.
That's going to be converting
Oh, yes.
whether or not voting on the individual items is something that subsequently we would like to do. Or just putting all the recommendations as presented verbatim as part of the recommendation to the legislative cabinet. So we're not excluding any one item.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, then how would the recommendations be presented as a document? Would it be that the task force? I think the issue is with that is that we obviously, I'm just speaking for me now. Some of the recommendations as individual recommendations I would oppose.
Right.
How will my view be represented if this is a task force or document?
So what we want to get to then is the actual summary of the recommendation. Because, the reality is there are some recommendations that I would probably look at and say, right? Same thing, right? And then some of them would be, like, I'll be honest, I would look at them, and a redistribution of resources would be, in my opinion, maybe an unfunded mandate, essentially, right? Because if we redistributed resources, that would mean that some places where there are currently, funds that are going in those directions would then be pulled from those directions. And those cities or counties that currently use those resources would then be unfunded. Right? I don't know that would be a situation that I would want to necessarily do, and I don't think those cities or counties would be thrilled with that option either, right? So that might not be the best option.
Yeah.
Right?
And what I want to make sure is that when the report comes out, that it reflects that this was basically for discussion in the task force.
Right.
Individual members made these recommendations, but these are not the opinion and they didn't, receive a consensus
Right.
vote
No,
or
absolutely.
even a majority vote if they did.
Right.
It's
no,
essentially one person's idea.
Right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Jamie Floyd, Green Cross Brewing, and yeah, I guess to come up with that, if there was like some sort of preamble to that part that clearly explained that would probably make it a lot better, because that way if someone were to misrepresent any of us in the press, we could point to that and say, hey, look, we're not a part of the specific decision there. That's seemed fair.
And, you know, I.
And Chair-
Go
Oh, go ahead.
ahead, whoever was online,
Oh,
sorry about that.
It's fine with the Oregon Wine Council. I was just gonna say, I mean, I guess my hope is that there are some recommendations that we do have agreement on, and my preference would be that we kind of go through and vote on different recommendations and see where there is agreement, and then maybe have, you know, the part of the report, I mean, the intro to the report be the things that there's agreement on, and then there could be a second section that has the other areas that were not, you know, approved by the majority.
Dr. Jean.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Tom Jean, OHA. I just wanted a little clarification perhaps on the on what Rosie had sent yesterday, again about the DOJ and the conflicts of interest. And one thing that Rosie said was that the decision we're making today, there's not going to be any real or potential conflicts of interest for any task force members because no one's benefiting from the decision tomorrow, which is today. And I understand that the legislature is who would make the final decision, but you know, the purpose of this task force is to make recommendations to the legislature. And if the legislature is not going to consider our recommendations, then this task force wouldn't have any purpose. So I understand we're kind of once removed from the decision here, but I still feel like that's a little bit confusing to say that there's no real or potential conflict of interest for industry members in this task force. So maybe somebody could clarify how that works.
Yeah, and sure, I see Christy Munson on there, so she could make the clarification for us, because we discussed it last week. And I think members did state their conflict of interest, so we can do it again for this meeting because of discussion with DOJ, some of the changes that we've had since yesterday.
Thank you. Christy, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Christy Munson from the DOJ. The advice we provided is that members of the committee of the task force, if they could benefit financially or have a financial detriment based on the decisions you're making here, or if they're family members or a business with which they're associated could so benefit, then they would have either an actual conflict of interest or a potential conflict of interest. Here, because you're merely a task force that's recommending actions to the legislature, and the legislature may take different actions. We don't know if they're going to take your recommendations. Anything you would do here would be a potential conflict, not an actual. And in the event that you have a potential conflict, your only obligation is to declare it on the record during the meeting which it's discussed and declare the general nature of it. After that, you are free to vote and discuss the matter.
Okay, thank you very much. That clarifies it. I mean, I think what was confusing was the email had said there were no real or potential conflicts of interest, but what we've established is there are some potential conflicts of interest, and those have been declared at the last meeting. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do recommend that they declare them each time an issue is discussed at each meeting. It's an excess of caution.
Okay, and I do also want to clarify that that while there is going to, obviously, the summary is going to provide overall recommendations to the legislature. The legislature will take those into consideration for any potential legislation. It doesn't mean that they won't. It's just that there will be considerations as we go forward, which ones are viable and which ones are not. I think I explained that before, that they're, you know, they have to take a lot of things into consideration. But those things that may rise to the top in terms of, you know, priorities for the task force or just, again, potential viability, I think, is really, what we might be looking at, yeah. That might be taking into consideration, so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I guess I was just gonna say, it sounds like we may be doing it again today, but I was not at the last meeting, so I would just say JD Floyd, I'm with New Classy Brewing, and I own an alcohol producing company that produces for ourselves as well as other warning businesses who could potentially lose the situation. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to go ahead and do that? Yeah.
Denali Romaine, Oregon Beer and Wine Distributors Association. I represent beer and wine distributors. Who could potentially, lose, I guess, from some sort of tax increase.
My name is Aaron Sarnoff with Two Town Cider House. I own an alcohol producing business that could potentially be impacted by the taxes.
Marcus Reed and Ms. Bush, I work for a supplier of alcoholic beverages that are detriment from the taxpayers.
But
Vaughn Berry with the Oregon Wine Council. Just wanted to declare a potential conflict of interest representing the wine industry, and my husband has a small winery.
Jen,
Hi, Jana Bikini with the Oregon Wine Growers Association wanted to declare a potential conflict of interest since I represent wine producers who could be hurt by these proposals.
thank you.
Solara Salazar, representing treatment centers. I have a potential conflict of interest in that my recommendation to have a tax that supports prevention could actually hurt my business. So still not sure if that's a conflict of potential, but
Thank you. Okay, so back to the possible, I guess, moment at hand. So the discussion as again sort of back, well, can we get back to the
Full list.
the full list? Sorry, Annalise.
Just summarize before, Annalise Stahl, the Alcohol and Drug Policy Commission. I want to make sure I'm kind of hearing the earlier discussion right. So it sounds like we're looking to have perhaps a motion to approve the preliminary recommendations to move forward in the report, not for purposes of approval or promotion or consensus on them individually, but a motion to move them forward.
To move them forward as as accepting them as a recommendation so that we can then summarize them and then go forward with them.
And then possibly a part two to say, these are the ones that we have consensus around.
Sorry. Yes. Oh, sorry, Craig.
I have I hope this might be helpful. I think what we've got is a staff report that's trying to do a difficult thing, which is encompass all of the discussion we've had here. And I think, Madam Chair, I think what you're saying is we would have a vote on submitting this as a staff report, and it does include different perspectives, different recommendations. So maybe if we use the word staff report, because I know that's part of our charge is to submit a report, and then we may submit recommendations. So is that the two-step that I kind of heard, we have kind of two pieces, Madam Chair? I'm hoping I'm clarifying and I'm tracking correctly.
Well, these are the overall recommendations first.
Right, and Director Prince is correct. We are doing it in a twofold step. Then we go and look if that is the recommendation from town member. So in our discussion this morning as well with DOJ, it is possible that this is the only motion to move forward on all the recommendations that were submitted as is. Potentially even giving task force members an opportunity to go back and revise, because as we can see from the list,
Yes.
they're not all fully in response to the questions that were presented from the from the bill. So we would give folks an opportunity to go back and revise if they so wish. But if everyone agreed that this is a recommendation that was submitted to staff, staff would then go back and review this. I think it's okay, and it would be public record that we can review those and probably provide a summary in the recommendations that these were things that were agreed upon by those. And not necessarily having to vote on them individually.
Right. Because one of the things I did note, of course, is that obviously every recommendation did not touch on every single piece. Right? That was one of the things that was a part of the, yeah.
I'm sorry to belabor this, Danilo Maine, Beer and Wine Distributors. I think the issue I'm having is the word recommendation, because what I'm worried about is how it appears in the final report. It appears that the task force has recommended something. So as long as, I think the issue isn't really how the OLCC ends up writing it. What I don't want to have happen is a report that suggests that the task force recommends A, B, C, and then we see that repeated in somebody's testimony in front of the legislature. It's misleading when it's really one person submitting a recommendation, to you.
Aaron, with two towns, and then not to jump the gun, but I did see your proposal for tentative extended meeting dates. I just wanted to reiterate that I do own a business. It's a day out of my, work life to come here every single time. And I committed till 9:15, which was the legislative end of this task force. And looking at all these dates, one of them is GABF, the largest beer festival in the country. Another one,
Okay.
we're entering harvest season and the season where we're traveling around the country. With our distributors. So highly unlikely that we're going to be able to make it with those dates.
And Chair, I noticed that I haven't been saying Rosie Shackett for the record, all citizen staff. I think these dates are tentative too, and they're listed there so we can have a discussion on those days. They're not,
Nothing written.
yeah, it's to have a conversation. It's a natural extension of the task force. It might be an hour. I don't think it's not for presentation, but it's to ensure that we are putting things on the record for comments, for review and revision and feedback from task force members, because we're not making these decisions on our own. But, yeah.
Comments, questions?
Just that I'm in a similar situation. It's hot harvest is now, but all these dates are calendar filled for November, so. Don't need to blame everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, the recommendations are simply an acceptance of what was already it's not like. I guess I see the word a little bit different. It's only accepting your recommendations that were submitted. In those pieces, and then we'll summarize them, and then we'll go from there. Sorry.
If I may offer, Sarah Lochner, Coalition of Local Health Officials. I think we could work on it in wordsmithing so that everyone's comfortable, just making sure that we understand that these are individual recommendations, not the group recommendations.
Exactly. Accepting the individual recommendations.
Right.
Or
as a point of discussion, the task force discussed these these individual recommendations and agreed upon these recommendations.
Solara Salazar, I was just gonna say the exact same thing on this. It says, discussion of task force members' proposed recommendations. So maybe we just could change the wording to, individual proposed recommendations versus recommendations. That's,
completely. I think that the word proposed here, because we haven't made a decision on anything just yet, it's all tentative until the vote is made and the motion is carried. And now it will be task force members' recommendations that we can discuss openly. So yes.
Do we call them concepts instead of recommendations?
No, they're recommendations. Was she asking for the record? They're recommendations because we're not submitting anything to the legislature as legislation. It's asked for recommendations to be discussed with the legislature for the health committees.
it's specific to the bill itself.
But we're not required to submit recommendations. We're required to submit a report, right? So we could submit a report with concepts.
recommendation may include recommendations as a language in the bill. We can pull that up and just review it together as well.
I think the question is with what we would be voting on when accepting a document like that is, are we voting to say, yes, somebody sent this to you? I mean, is that what the vote is? Because we obviously don't accept many of the concepts. So what would the vote that we would be taking be? Someone sent this to you and this is compiled it and here's the document. We accept that? Accept that this is the document?
That, right there.
But that's
What's
what the
the
document.
What are we voting?
Compiled list
File list,
of recommendations submitted on every single member.
what you sent.
What you sent in and
Yeah.
your six members.
Yeah.
Drafted, you're voting to say, we sent this document into for final consideration for the report.
We sent our document to you. That's what we-
That's
Yeah.
what, and this is the
They
compilation
sent,
of that, and Solaris and.
ADPC sent,
Yeah.
and whatever. That's what we're voting, everybody sent a shot. That's,
And the decision doesn't.
I'm just accepting it, I'm just accepting it.
Well, and sorry, I just want to kind of play this out because we're all smart in this room and we're having this conversation and we're all hearing each other. But when this comes out to someone else, like a press person who doesn't really know a lot about the issue or a legislator who doesn't really know a lot about the issue, they're going to see recommendation and take that to mean that the people who voted in support of forwarding the recommendations supported the recommendations. I mean, that's my concern. And I think the challenge with having it laid out this way.
I think the vote is accepting that the recommendations were submitted. And then the actual vote is on the, when the summaries are voted on different.
And one clarification, just kind of, Rosie Shacking for the record, recommendation, I think can be changed. We can use position, we can use any other word, so it doesn't seem like we're moving. So, this is a recommendation to us from DOJ, just to say, there's a way to go in and, word it differently, and we would of course bring it back to the task force members to make sure that everyone is okay with that language. So we can word it differently. Mission guidance opinion, That should be commission now.
I think that's what's right, just accepting this.
Jamie with Ninkasi Brewing. I guess I'm just curious why, if this is all on public record, we have to officially vote for it. But it would involve the DOJ to tell us that it's not official, that it's official. A lot of stuff like that. It just seems like we all put in our recommendations and it gets printed in the report. So it seems like a lot to even put us in a position to vote for something that is part of public record. So I guess that's
Christie.
clarity for that piece. That'd be great. Thanks you. Thanks, Christie.
Clarification, please, if you would.
Thank you, Chair. The first comment I'd like to make is I completely understand some of the members' concerns about the terminology that staff has used in their report. Since the entire committee has a charge to make a report to the legislature and may make recommendations, using the word recommendation to reflect what the individuals like or want is probably confusing. And so I would suggest that staff consider alternate language, perhaps opinion, position, guidance, whatever. Secondly, to the extent that the chair and the board want to review this document and acknowledge that it just merely reflects individuals' guidance or opinions, And the board can vote, say, yeah, we want to attach this document to our final report to the legislature. Done and done. I hope that answers your questions. I'm happy to address anything else.
Jason Renaud, please.
I'm sorry I'm late. Sorry for the noise in the background. Have the recommendations with attributions been circulated with the individuals' names or organizations' names that wrote the recommendation? Thank you. I mean, and if not, why not?
Sorry, Reverend Shackman, for the record, that's actually the document that we're looking at to vote on today with individuals' names associated with the recommendations.
And he's asking, has it been?
And no, this document has not been distributed because we're required to have a motion and have a consensus on that motion. So
Looking at it right now. We're looking at it right now.
It's been shared just out from me. I think that's it.
Yes, it's being shared right now.
Right now. For consideration.
Can I ask a follow-up? So I don't think every recommendation attributes to it who it came from. Am I missing something?
Could you pull that up, Penny?
Like recommendation A.
They've changed the document.
Oh, they did. Oh, I see. Okay, so what was sent out to not have that in.
No, this is for consideration today.
Okay,
Sorry for my ignorance, but we've got what, a couple, like 30 recommendations. Can we just vote on those and bang it out and be done today? I mean, there a reason why we don't do that?
On the individual recommendations,
I mean,
that's the other option.
Well, going back to the, where we started again, though, before we go through them individually, what I'm understanding is we want a motion, and I'm happy to make a motion to accept the proposed recommendations of the task force members for the purposes of discussion. And waiting for that motion.
Purposes of discussion today.
for purposes of discussion.
And Sarah Lochner, I'm happy to second that motion.
Okay, we'll vote. And I get it, call the roll for purposes of discussion.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Can I ask for some clarification? What does it mean to accept the recommendations for purposes of discussion?
It's just, we're gonna talk about them.
Okay,
All this, that's all it means. We're gonna talk about them.
so generally, a motion is to accept something. And then there's a second, and then there's the discussion that occurs, but the motion is to move for an action to do something. So
We're accepting them. Yes, we are accepting them as a part of the record to then discuss them. This is this is exactly what the question was, I think, earlier about accepting these as a part of the record, correct? This was the earlier concern, what you said about the recommendations. So whether or not we do not want to call them recommendations is the question. We can call them whatever we want to. I don't care. But if we're not going to call them recommendations, then we still have that problem, but they're just a part of the record to discuss.
Jamie Floyd, just curious if the word individual recommendations or whatever got put in that.
We can call them individual recommendations, certainly.
Compile a list of individual recommendations.
Compiled list of individual recommendations for discussion.
Can we change the word recommendation based on what Kristen just said to us?
Individual opinions. We will refer to them as the individual opinions of task force members. How about that? Does that make everybody happy? I have a migraine, folks. Do not make me crankier than I already need to be right this very second.
But I can amend my
Thank you.
motion to accept the proposed individual opinions of task force members for purposes of discussion.
Sarah Lochner, I'm happy to second that motion.
Adam, can we have a roll call on that, please?
Of course.
Chair, I'm so sorry. I need to interrupt one more time. Discussion will happen on a motion no matter what. I need to clarify, is the motion on the table a motion for the task force to actually accept all of these individual opinions for eventual inclusion into a report that you're going to forward to the legislature? That is what I just want to be absolutely clear, because discussion will happen no matter what.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm concerned about, because it looks then like we all are voting yes on, for example.
They will be a part of the overall report, and then we will discuss them and deal with the summaries of them and vote on the individual pieces. Those pieces will then rise to the top as the actual parts that get voted on separately.
But based on what Christie just said, am I now accepting via vote, if I were to vote yes, accepting somebody's recommendation for a tax? I guess that's
No. Come on. Because you will also have accepted yours that says no tax. I'm accepting yours that says no tax.
If I may,
Solaris accepting yours that says no tax.
Yes, for the record.
Yes, that's the thing.
So let's hear from
Christie?
Chair, if I may, I can perhaps offer some clarification.
Of course.
If the motion on the table is that the committee is going to consider whether to accept the individual opinions as just a summary of the individual opinions and for eventual inclusion in a final report that will be forwarded to the legislature, that would be very clear. If the motion is just to accept for discussion, it's just not very clear. And I think the intent of the movement and the committee and staff is just that the committee would review the individual opinions, say, yeah, this is what we discussed. These are the individual opinions. It doesn't indicate consensus. It doesn't indicate a vote. It doesn't indicate support for any individual opinions. It's just showing that these are the things we discussed. This is where these are the individual opinions, and it will be eventually attached to the report that is forwarded to the legislature. Then that motion would be very clear, and I think would satisfy the intent of the parties around the table, but I'm not sure. I'm not there, and I haven't been a part of your process.
I have one other question. Sarah Lochner, Coalition of Local Health Officials. If we wanted to revise our opinions that were put forward, when would be the right time to do that? Before we accept it or after we accept it? I know, I'm sorry.
I can answer that, Chair, if you'd like. Generally speaking, amendments to a motion happen when we're discussing the motion. So you have a motion, a second, and discussion. And at that point, there are times when people say, you know what, this needs to be changed. For example, the word recommendation would be changed to individual opinions or whatever, right? So that would happen during the discussion.
Okay.
Well, if we can reproduce what Christie just said in terms of a motion, I would expect that. We're opening up for discussion the opinions that have been submitted to the OLCC for task force review.
So one without the version, Christie, maybe you can help us with this, Rosie Shapkin, the record. We can take a break put back together and provided to task force members so they can review right now based on what Kristen just said.
All right, folks, are we willing to take just a few minutes to just sort of wordsmith this situation and? All right, let's see. A few minutes to wordsmith this bad boy. We'll do that, yeah. Folks, apologies for the delay in moving everything back. Unfortunately, we do not have the language that we need right now. And we're not able to come to a place where DOJ has the language that we need right now. It's very complicated and we're not getting there. So what I would like to do is propose that we deal with the extension of our time and and getting us to be able to accept a motion, or hopefully I would propose a motion to extend our timeline for the report. I've already had a discussion with the chair of the committee, behavioral health, to accept our report in the December legislative days. He's agreed to do that. So we are okay with that. And we are, of course, we've had a little bit of a discussion about creating just a bit of an extension of our time with the meetings and maybe trying to do that over the next couple of weeks online. Just an hour here and there over the next couple of weeks to have further discussions and hopefully come up with a better motion about what we're doing here, because we're just not able to come up with the language that we need right this very minute. We want to create as much of a tight timeline as possible. So there we are for this moment.
Chair?
Yes, Dawn.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we had a motion and a second. And so I just want to make sure that we're okay just letting it go and don't need to have it withdrawn.
I withdraw the last motion. Annalise Dahl, Alcondra Policy Commission.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Is there any discussion on that situation beyond that? Yes, sir.
Is it possible, I'm sorry, Aaron, two towns, for Rosie just to summarize the meetings that we've had to date and submit that as our final findings? Is that, I mean, does that work? I mean, that captures the essence of everything we've addressed.
That's a great question, because we've worked on a lot of those summaries. We've worked with individual members. And so those are summarizing and capturing the information from the presentation. The question now is whether or not, as been charged by the task force language, we may include recommendations. So we have submitted that for the recommendation. And so if we don't want to submit like an overarching compile list of recommendation that you submitted, that will be a question that we submit to the rest of the task force members to make a determination on as well. So we do have a compile list of just on the presentation.
And one other follow-up question, if I may, just on DOJ policy, and there's a bunch of resources on the website that weren't presented, things that were added to the website. And I believe a letter that was sent via email just to task force members. Is that problematic in the same way that what we're dealing with now is?
That will be a question for DOJ. We've had ongoing conversation about the public meeting comments and how that is being submitted, opening up a couple public meetings so folks can put information on the record for the purposes of this task force. But that's a good question. So those are the ongoing questions for DOJ as well. Now when coming down to this, I think we thought this would be less complex in terms of providing information and recommendation and following the letter of the law. But clearly, it's a little bit more complex. And so we're looking to DOJ for additional feedback.
Let me look at the airline distributors. I like the idea of the OLCC summarizing the different task force meetings, if that's what's required to get the report out, as a way to get us to a final place here. So if that's one of the directions that you're looking to go to, it makes some sense.
So, do we want to vote on whether necessarily that we have the extension of the meeting?
That is,
That as a first step, because it will take some time. We will need additional time to go through all of that. So,
so that is, I would like to entertain a motion to extend the task force to where to go?
deadline.
The report, to extend the reporting deadline beyond the September 15th required deadline to the December legislative days to, yes, interim committee on legislative assembly related to health, behavioral health. Director Prince.
Yeah, I move that we ask Chair Sanchez to ask the chair of the interim health committee to move receipt of the House Bill 3610 recommendation to the first day of the December legislative days. I don't have that date in front of me.
So I think it's December 10th.
I move to December 10th. So I move that we recommend that Chair Sanchez ask the chair of the interim health committee for an extension of time to December 10th, 2024.
I get it. Sarah Lochner, I second.
Motion is moved by,
Is that just for the delivery of the final report, or is that for more meetings?
that is for the final report.
Or extend for the, so there potentially might be more meeting just to make sure that we're clarifying with task force members as a whole, because we need to get a quorum on what we move forward.
Right.
So the final report has to be reviewed by everyone and we get a quorum on that. The information that's moving in, any time there's a revision, we have to move on to that as well. That's a discussion for the task force for public records.
That is the motion, that is the second, and then there's discussion.
Discussion.
That's a discussion.
That's a discussion?
Yes.
Okay. Can I introduce a motion as well? So I don't know. how it's worded.
Actually, you can offer some discussion.
And
So the discussion would be,
that we don't have any further meetings, that we do what we need to do today, and I would move that Rosie summarizes the meetings as they've been, and is her final report.
I don't know that that's entirely possible.
Discussion, not a motion here. Solara Salazar, Seal Treatment Center. In my perception, it appears that, there are some at this table that are very willing to change the wording, to amend, whatever makes the industry feel comfortable about the wording of the report. It appears like we've now run the clock to 2:22, with 40 minutes left. And, now your proposal is this is it. Let's just have this be the final report. It feels incongruent, right? Either we're all on the same page of, figuring out the wording, getting this report submitted in a timely manner, where we're not. And it feels like on the one hand, you're stalling, and on the other hand, you don't want to have more meetings. And so I just would like to get a more clear picture, right? I'm okay with shortening these timeframes if we can get everybody on the same page and moving things in a timely manner, and it doesn't feel like that's happening. So I just want to throw that out there.
I don't think, the point of summarizing is to stall or to have less discussions, but we've had a lot of these discussions where we clearly are just not on the same page. And I think we've had a lot of meetings recently since we started discussing, which is great that we're finally discussing. But when we've started discussing, we find out there isn't a lot of agreement. And I just don't think more of these is going to produce some sort of agreement. Maybe there is on something more nuanced, and I guess that's, that's something to explore. But if it's simply what we've seen already, I think we know where this is going, which is why I think it does make some sense to have the OLCC essentially summarize all the different presentations to the task force. There were different sides that presented, different ideas for tax increases, not questioning the OHA dollars, everything else. We have a real summary of everything that the task force worked on, which is comprehensive, and that could be submitted to the legislature. I just don't know what sort of recommendations will really come out of this group after listening to a couple of these meetings where we just are spending a lot of time not agreeing on things.
Rob,
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, yes.
I think there's a lot more to talk about than just raising taxes, and I support extending the timeline.
Thank you. Any other further discussion? So I will also just say, my concern here is that there were only 7 documents submitted. And of those 7 documents, not everyone touched on the 7 different elements that were required in the bill. So I think there is more to discuss. I think there are lots of different pieces that did not get touched on. And I'm a little concerned that there's also not been full engagement. I think a lot of times people were very quiet in this meeting. And I'm a little concerned about that. I'm a little frustrated by it as well. And I don't think it's appropriate to, very often we have these situations where we say, in many meetings, it's, step up and step back, right? Sometimes people are very, like we're the one, I know I'm one of those ones. I'm the talker person, I say a lot in meetings, and there are a lot of people who don't say anything at all. And yet, when they do, very powerful. So I should be the one to sometimes step back and be quiet a little bit and let other people talk. And sometimes they just don't. So maybe we have to change the dynamic here a little bit. And I don't know, I guess I feel like we have not heard from everyone. And I'm a little frustrated by that, and I'm a little frustrated that I just don't feel like we've touched on all of the things, and nor have we laid out all of the information, and we certainly haven't heard enough from the public about it. And we set up a situation during legislative days, where we've, offered an opportunity, and we put that out there a little bit for the public, for public input. And that was a part of, we laid that out as an option, and, and that, yes, that was above and beyond before we even made this, and that maybe it's just, that's just me, maybe it's, we could have voted no, not to have the extension, and we'll blow that out, but it just feels like we could have done this a little different. I just feel like there's more to discuss, and maybe that's hard for people, I get it. But a lot of us make a lot of accommodations all the time to get things done. And there just has to, if this is important to people, then we need to show up. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that, there was, in the recommendation was to your point of engagement, some things that were presented completely differently to your point. So either they were not paying attention to the basics of the business in that piece. So I guess I'm just trying to agree with that, that there does seem to be some selective attention giving to it. I definitely, from my position, really am trying to see all the perspectives of it and understand, especially the complexities of the way that the nonprofit world works with regard to health. So I guess I'm just trying to say the same thing. I hear what you're saying, but it's also been a lot of meetings where it is sort of at this level versus talking about the actual pieces. And I don't feel like everybody on the task force has an understanding of how our business works and how some of these recommendations would affect our brewery. I don't feel like we've had that discussion. There was just an idea brought up and then we've been voting on it. So just adding to that piece that, you know, it's a tough situation that we've all been sort of put in and worked together through. So I was saying to Rosie and to you on the way out, or to Rosie, that people's hearts are in the right place. The intentions there, just there's a lot of really not coming together in communication. So.
I'm sure for the record, Rosie Shankin, OCC, that's one of the reasons for the extension to afford that time as well, if folks want to go over those. And so we're trying to come up in a more articulate way of having a motion where we can discuss those issues. That pertains to industry and also pertains to the advocates on for the task force. And so that's the need, as much as I would love to put it all together, I think the conversations in the last two task force meetings actually kind of extended us already into logically, otherwise we're going to turn out a document that it's going to say it's a draft before it's not a final.
I just have one quick follow-up on that with regards to the public comment period part of it. And I guess saying that there's people on the task force that haven't necessarily been engaged and heard, I'm confused as to why our list of recommendations that the legislator may or may not choose would be for public commenting. I'll get that because I missed the last meeting. I mean, that's that piece of it. Watched it again, but I didn't totally heard it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, just the public, just this is a governor appointed task force meeting where our recommendations are not actually a bill proposal. So I guess I'm confused as why public comment on this part of it, even before a draft is put out, would be a part of it. That's all I'm asking. That makes sense.
I think he's asking why would we be asking for public commentary when that's, you know, as part of this task force? Does that why would we do that?
I might have an answer to that. I think for the most part, when we were having this discussion and putting it together, the idea was that we were going to move forward on the compiling list of recommendations, having it for the final report and having a discussion on that and open that up to the public meeting. But now that we're having this discussion about whether or not we're going to have that, that's kind of changed the conversation a little bit. So, but in general, it's good to have transparency. It's good to have it open to the public for public records purposes and public meeting law. So that's a recommendation from the DOJ as well. Cool.
Thank you.
Part of everything. Yes. Okay, there is a motion on the table. The further discussion. So again, we did not have necessarily a discussion about the actual, about any extension of the actual meetings or any details of actual meetings. We can do that offline if people would like. Do that now. But I'm happier to do that offline when we can do technicalities around it. But if we'd like to go to the vote, happy to do that as well. Adam.
Chief Barrett. Vaughn Berry.
I don't know if you could hear me, but I said yes.
Gotcha. Sure. Back to her. Rob Corbett.
Yes.
Annalise Dolph.
Yes.
Jamie Floyd.
Yes.
Dr. Jean.
Yes.
Todd Jeter, Sean Colmer, Sarah Lochner, Jana McCamey,
Yes.
Director Prince,
Yes.
Marcus Reed,
Yes.
Jason Renault, Danelle Romaine,
Yes.
Solera Salazar,
Yes.
Aaron Sarnoff Wood. Motion passes.
Have to do detailed date sort of things online and whatnot. Oh, Fawn. There you are. You had your hand up there?
It wouldn't let me come off mute, so I was just letting you know I hung up and dialed back in.
And if you want to.
No, it's fine. It's, we don't have to do that whole thing.
Okay. Thank you.
One win.
Perfect. That's good. Okay. We'll go ahead and let staff go ahead and take care of any date planning type things. And beyond that, I think we're okay. Oh,
The tentative dates right now is for September 25th as for legislative date. in the
Right.
Capitol.
yeah.
But we can do a meeting, we can look for a date prior to.
I think we need to look for every date prior to that and eliminate the October dates entirely because obviously the industry has a lot of things during that time that they cannot do. So if we could do everything prior to that, that would be much better.
Okay.
Yes.
Would we do like a doodle poll or something along
Doodle
those lines?
polls
Okay.
and we want to, as much as possible, if we can do very short online if necessary. I'm gonna be out of town a little bit here and there as well, so it's gonna be very difficult. But an hour and a half necessary. Okay,
And this will also all be virtual. It could be all virtual. Doesn't have to be in person.
doesn't have to.
So just to clarify, we're meeting in September, virtually only a couple times, and you're gonna send out some good options.
Right. We'll send out some options prior to the September 25th date. So between now and September 25th, we're gonna look for a couple more dates to meet for 1 hour. Just to clarify some of the things that we're gonna work on in the interim, so we can present in terms of the language on voting for the compiled list. How we go about doing that, whether or not we're just gonna move forward without having the recommendations listed, or some other approach to it. So it's going to be a point of discussion. Yes, for those kind of items.
Right. Good, folks? All right, thank you.
I don't want to bring this up again, but is it possible for us to have the staff report so that we can see it in advance of having a meeting?
You know, we have something available that we're working on in terms of a presentation and the summary, so we can probably provide those. It's a summary, and folks have already worked on that. We communicated with each of the individual members to make sure that the summary of the presentation is lot based. So
Perfect.
it's not a voting thing, it's just a presentation.
Yep, got it. All right, we all good?
I'm just curious, so in this next meeting, we're gonna get some sort of documents, possibly from Rosie, that's outlining meetings that we've had so far, correct? And the language of the merged recommendations, or what is it we're even discussing?
We are planning, the goal is to discuss the motions that we're moving forward on that particular, I'm moving the report, the final report, what gets into the final report with regards to the recommendation. So you might choose that you don't want to include the recommendations, but I think it's going to be important for that to be part of a discussion and discuss amongst all chapters. Yeah.
Hey, folks. Good now? We are adjourned.